There's one game that changed my perspective on things a lot. This was admittedly prior to COVID and prior to a current global situation, which I guess you can look up the year if you're looking at this many years from now, but if you're watching this fresh, you probably know which situation I'm talking about. But the game I'm talking about is Metro Exodus. It's, well, you can just look it up. I'm not going to waste your time explaining the game. It's a very good game. It's a game that's made in Russia, which kind of makes it a bit controversial right now because of the current geopolitical situations. But I don't think that should take away from the studio or the people who made it. It's an excellent game. It's one of the most immersive and best games I played in 2019. And it certainly changed my perspective about how to go about designing your game. You see, I can't help but think that a game like that could not have been made in a country where the salaries are higher. Now, I know that sounds a little bit bad, and I'm not bagging that studio because it's an excellent game, and I'm not having a shot at salaries for the video game industry in general. If you think about it, people who work in video games have the ability to work in software and IT, but choose to make video games and take a pay cut because they love the art of it. So I think that's a beautiful thing. But the point about Metro Exodus is that it's an excellent game with lots of features. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I constantly rail against the dangers of feature creep. But this is a game that the animation is smooth, it just has so many features, and it makes you think, my goodness, they must have had a really big team working really long hours to achieve something of this technical ability. And just the juiciness of the game and just how immersive it is, it's a very good game. Like, is it the best game I've ever played? It's up there. You know, obviously there's other games that I always mention, games like The Return of the Obra Dinn or BioShock Infinite. It's another one of my best games ever. There's quite a lot on the list. But there's something about that game that it opened my eyes. And what it opened my eyes to is that when you design a game, better said, if you're in the business of making games and you want to survive, you really need to play to your strengths, because it is a brutal industry. I mean, most businesses are brutal, but this one is brutal in its own way because there's the AAA lot and they live in their own world. And then there's the smaller slice of the pie, which is the indie lot. And when you're in the indie lot, which I'm guessing, since you're watching this video, chances are you're a solo developer or in an indie studio, you're fighting for that smaller piece of the pie. And so I think it's really important. I mean, again, this is an important thing in life in general. But I do think that when you're planning your game, unless you and your team are the very, very best at what you do, then it's worth considering that you need to really play to your strengths according to what you make. For example, if you're a native English speaker and you have some writing experience, or you're just a good storyteller, you should really, really lean into that. Because that's I think anyone or any video that explains how the market works, they'll tell you that the vast majority of sales are from English-speaking countries or countries where almost everybody speaks English and they're definitely playing the game in English. So I'm talking about Scandinavia. In terms of where sales are highest, obviously USA is number one for I think almost all devs, and then followed closely by UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, all the English-speaking world. So if you're a native English speaker, and like I said, a good storyteller, good writer, lean into that, because that's a slightly unique advantage you might have over developers who aren't native English speakers and would either outsource that or might not be able to put in the subtlety that you can in the story writing. That being said, if you're not from a native English speaker, don't think that you've completely lost the advantage, because you definitely haven't. You have a unique perspective that maybe a lot of other devs who might come from this Anglo world might not have. And another thing that you could potentially take advantage of if you're not an English speaker and happen to be in a country where the salaries aren't as high, is that you can actually have more people in your team and have more programmers, more coders, more designers, more artists, and take advantage of that to make a bigger game with more scope and, again, more features. You can really take advantage of that type of situation. Now, you can say that yes, maybe somebody who's an English speaker can then outsource, but it'll cost more, and if you're not speaking the same language as the people you've outsourced to, the communication's not going to be quite as good. I think if you're this team and you all have that cultural and language unity, I'll call it, theoretically, as a team, you'll work smoother and you can achieve those goals a lot faster than outsourcing. We've outsourced in the past with mixed results. Communication's a big thing. You might think you're saving a lot of money sending a lot of your programming, a lot of your testing, this and that, to countries where the salaries aren't quite as high. And sometimes it works out great. Sometimes, you just understand each other perfectly. It's worked out. But I'd say just as many times it hasn't, and we've wasted time and money, and maybe we should have just had it done locally. But these are just things to take into consideration in terms of like your own strength, because selling games, I feel, is a lot more about uniqueness and concept than it is about trying to provide an all-round experience, especially when you're not AAA. If you're a AAA, you can make some crazy game like Yakuza that has a bit of everything and everything's rather good. If you're indie, you should focus in on the bit that you do best and then get that bit really, really good. And that's why you should really play to your strengths. And any talent of yours that can add to the picture, by all means put it in, because it will make a difference. Like I said, I was from a music for advertising perspective before I started designing video games. So I had perspective on the music industry and I had perspective on advertising. So those two fortes I really brought in with me. So I wrote all the music for our games, and so that's how we're able to sell soundtracks as well, which actually, it's a significant amount of our revenue is actually through that, because a lot of people like to buy deluxe packs. But then even the advertising perspective, that making every bit as attractive as possible and pleasing to the eye, I felt that that's also made a difference. So when you design a game, whilst I think it's really important to have that perspective of what's fun, that really should be number one. Like, what's my primary gameplay loop? What is my thematic vision? At the same time, try to address whether you think you can do it. For example, like I said, my background is advertising and music, and I did a lot of ghostwriting, so story as well. So we lean in heavily with that. And I found that whilst I can't design the most complex of games, we feel that the story and the music and the visuals are really nice. And that's the part that our clientele, our fans, the people who like our games, really go for. And there have been times that we've tried to differently. I've tried to design a game that was a bit heavier on the gameplay side. I tried to design like a business sim game once. I tried, a card game and this and that. And I found that because that wasn't really my specialty, we burnt a lot of time. I think eventually maybe I would have gotten good at it, but that's a tough balancing act, because if you're into game dev, you're probably of one of two situations. Either you're in the industry and you've decided, okay, now it's my time, in which case that's great, you already know what you know, fantastic. But I actually think that's not going to be the majority of you. I think a lot of people are going to be that they worked on something else, but they're passionate about making video games. So after a while, they might have saved up some money and they go, okay, that's it. This is my time. I'm going to make a video game now. And you're not quite sure what you're good at. And that's fine for the first few games. Like I've said before in other videos, experiment, try to get it good at this and that. But it's also important to realize your strengths quite early and lean into them, because I think forcing the issue with something that you might not naturally be as good at, while it's good for personal growth, it might not be that good for the business of it all. Because, as I've mentioned in other videos, the best way to make money out of video games is finishing them and publishing them. And if you get bogged down with features that you might not be so good at making, it could inhibit your ability to regularly publish games and understand both the art and craft of it all and the business. Anyway, I hope that was useful, and I'll see you for another video. Cheers.